Passage. Miss you. Hope you've been praying for me. It's weird to be on vacation and to teach you on a video, but I hope you've had a great night, and I'm excited to start a new series which we're calling hashtag relationship goals. And before we jump in, I just want to make this really clear on why we're doing a series on dating. Why we're doing a series on dating is because when I look back on my middle school and high school days, and when I have conversations with y'all, it breaks my heart to see over and over again people making decisions, saying things, doing things that ruin relationships. And not even just dating relationships, but we are our own worst enemy when it comes to friendships, when it comes to dating relationships, especially. And looking back at middle school and high school, wow, I made some dumb choices and mistakes, especially when it came to dating, and it did not lead to anything good. And so what I want to do is I want to take 3 weeks to kind of talk about dating. What is dating? What's our real hashtag relationship goal that God would want us to achieve and aspire to? Should you date, or what does a relationship look like? And so that's what we're going to get into. And so tonight, I just want to talk about the ultimate goal. So the first question I want to ask to start us off tonight is, what is your goal? What is your hashtag goal, especially when it comes to dating? And be very honest. Like, if I was absolutely, completely honest in answering this question when I was in high school, the reason why I wanted to date was to impress my friends, was to make myself feel better because, oh, I have a girlfriend. That means I'm like worth like being hanging out around. Maybe for some of you, it's I just want a boyfriend or girlfriend, and the reason why I want to date is to take pictures, to post on Instagram and Snapchat, to have cute pictures. I don't know what your reason is, but the first question I want you to think about is, what is your goal? And that's really important, because when you answer that question, the next question I want to ask is, where do you get this goal from? Like, what in your life is forming, influencing, and shaping your idea of what a hashtag relationship goal looks like for you? And once again, if we're completely honest, most of the time we get our relationship goals, our advice, and what we aspire to by the couples we see on social media, whether it's the couples in the movies or the TV shows. I know all the girls are looking for their Ryan Gosling or whatever the guy is now. That's what all the girls were looking for when I was in high school. But where we get our goal determines what our goal is and how we go about dating. And that's just a matter of fact. And so the question is that goal working for you? Like, getting your goal and your expectations of dating from movies, TV shows, other friends, is that working? Like, if you've been in a dating relationship, has that gone well for you? And if I were to speak on behalf of you and speak on myself, it isn't working. And I think there's good news when it comes to dating, because the Bible doesn't talk about dating a lot, but it talks a lot about relationships. And tonight, I want to submit to you that there might be a better place to get our expectations and our hashtag relationship goals from than the movies and culture society. And I think that means going to the Bible and looking at what the church teaches and what followers of Jesus have been teaching. And so the first scripture I want to start out with tonight is Paul in his letter to the Romans. And this is Romans chapter 12, verse 2. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. So Paul is saying, don't conform, don't set your expectations, and don't order your life around the pattern and thoughts and ideas of this world, but instead what Paul is calling followers of Jesus back then and what he's calling us to today is transform your mind and renew your mind. And what that means is kind of clear it out from what you've been taught and fed from things that are not of God, because what our goals are will determine what we do. And so Paul is saying you need to renew your mind, almost clear the hard drive, and get your expectations and your goals not from other people or not from movies and culture, but from God and his word and scripture. And then he says, then when you do this, you will be able to test and approve what God's will is. God's plan and hope for your life is when you what happens is when you renew your mind and when you set your attention and focus and you get your expectations from God, what that does is it helps you follow and live God's will and plan for your life that leads to life and life to the full instead of bitterness, disappointment, and pain like most of our dating relationships lead to. And so the main point that I want to talk about tonight, and then we'll wrap it up, is this. The goal of dating is holiness, not happiness. And so I'm going to say that again. The goal of dating, our biblical, God-given #relationship goal is holiness, not happiness. And this is really important because if we're honest, a lot of us are chasing happiness when it comes to a dating relationship. And so the goal of dating, finding a boyfriend, finding your girlfriend, and keeping that relationship is to receive and get happiness. And the problem with that is it makes the relationship about us, and it's me focused, I centered, and what that turns into is a dating relationship where both people are taking instead of giving. They're demanding instead of serving, and they're making it about themselves instead of making it about the other person. And you've been in dating relationships like this. It never goes well. And you've been in friendships maybe like this where the goal is happiness and to keep each other happy, and what ends up happening is the other person in the relationship feels the weight and burden and responsibility of providing something to you that they were never meant to provide. And if I could be completely honest with you tonight, this is a big part of Becca and I's dating relationship. Early on, I fell in love with Becca, of course, because how could you not? Because she's amazing. And what ended up happening was I had the goal of happiness over holiness. And what that ended up doing is Becca felt pressure to give me life that only God was meant to give me. She felt the weight and responsibility to give me happiness and joy that only God could give me, full happiness and joy. And what that ended up doing was this weight and burden on her. She could not give that to me because she was not designed and created to give that to me. And God has not created and designed you to be a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a husband, and a wife to give everything that the other person needs to live a good life. And that's where God comes in, because God is the only one that can provide full joy, true happiness, everlasting peace. And so, one more time, the goal of dating is holiness, not happiness. And we just got done talking about how chasing and setting the goal of happiness kind of just doesn't work. And so I want to end by talking about the holiness part. What does it look like? If our goal is holiness and not happiness, what does that mean and what does that look like? And so essentially that's a church word, holiness. Essentially what having a goal of holiness is growing your love and affection for God. Holiness simply means to be separate, to be separated. If something is holy, it's set apart. It is distinguished. People can discern and know that this is different. And the question is, your dating relationships, whether that's in the past or right now, if you are dating, would people say that there's something different in a good way? Because I'm sure we all know relationships with her, oh, it is different and it is not different in a good way. But holiness means it is different, it is noticeable, it stands out in a good way, and it draws attention to God. And if we're honest one more time tonight, because we're going to be really honest, I'm sure many of our dating relationships are not focused on holiness, and it does not bring attention to God. It does not help both people in the relationship grow in their love and walk with Jesus, and therefore it is a happy relationship and not a holy relationship. And the paradox is when you have your goal of holiness, this is what's fascinating about God, is when you chase holiness and you are getting satisfied by God and not a person, when you look to life for God and not a person, when you look for your identity in God and not a person, what ends up happening is your happiness is so much more full. Like, this is what switched with Becca and I. Like, instead of chasing happiness with her, I realigned that and I started chasing God more than chasing Becca. And I started finding my identity in God and not in my relationship with Becca. And what ended up happening was it made Becca happier. It made me happier because we weren't caring and demanding and taking from each other. Instead, we were living a life of holiness where we were serving each other, providing for each other, encouraging one another instead of making it about ourselves. And that's where true happiness comes from, is when you seek holiness, the end result is you eventually get happiness. And so it's in your best interest to seek holiness in a relationship. And so as we close, we're going to talk in the next couple of weeks of the details on should you date, how should you go about dating, but this night is just about the ultimate goal. Answering honestly, what have your goals been in dating relationships? Where do you get these goals from, and what would it look like what Paul says, to not conform to the pattern of the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, following and living in God's will, and leading a good life? And are you in the place where you can honestly chase holiness over happiness? Are you mature enough to be in a relationship where you are serving and giving and chasing God more than chasing another person? If you're not, then maybe you're not ready to date. But we're going to get to that over the next couple of weeks. But I really want you to answer tonight honestly. What are your hashtag relationship goals? Where do you get from? And do you think it's time for you to start setting your goal to holiness over happiness? Again, guys, I love y'all so much, and it's so weird not being there in person and just talking to you and the camera. Thanks for joining me in my office. I love you. Be praying for me. I am seeking God's presence and attention as I'm considering what the passage is going to look like in 2021, which is crazy to even say 2021, so be praying for me. And let me know if you memorized Ephesians 2, 4 through 10, and I will gladly pay for your D now. Like I said, I would last week. Just go to Sean Barr, and he'll get with me about that. Again, I love y'all, and have a great night in small groups.